Behind me is the Best Western Hotel in Hanley city centre. It was formerly the Quality Hotel, which is where we held the 2007 UK convention.
In its heyday, it was called the Grand Hotel, and we do know that Stan Laurel drank here on at least one occasion during the week of 31st of March to the 6th of April 1952, while they played at the local Theatre Royal. Before they came to the area, Laurel and Hardy had been on an engagement in Sunderland for 1 week from the 24th of March. It is believed, but not entirely verified, that they also arrived here, although Stoke itself is a contender, as we shall see later. The car park to the hotel is built partly upon where Hanley train station used to stand, and we believe, but cannot verify, that Stan and Ollie's show was packed onto the train here before heading to the Empire in Leeds for their next engagement, commencing this 7th of April. This would have been on Saturday the 5th of April, after the last performance of the week. Several eyewitnesses said that all of the clothes and the scenery were packed into trunks and skips onto large trucks outside the theatre, then transferred to Hanley railway station onto a 40-foot railway van which would travel overnight. The train van had Laurel and Hardy show written on the side in chalk apparently.
And just up the road here is the former theatre where Laurel and Hardy played. Come with me. And this is what is left of the former Theatre Royal in Pall Mall, Hanley.
The origins of this theatre can be dated back to 1852, although the one on this site was rebuilt in 1887, with a capacity of 2,600 patrons who entered from Brunswick Street around the corner. Incidentally, on the 21st of November to the 1st of December 1903, the theatre did their own version of Balfe's opera, The Bohemian Girl. In June 1949, the stage and auditorium was destroyed by fire, and it took the next 2 years to restore it. By the time Stan and Ollie played here, the venue had only been reopened 8 months, and it featured 3 seating levels and a new capacity of 1,800 patrons. The stage manager in 1952 was Hugh Dix, and the managing director of the 14-piece orchestra was Reg Lawton. It was here that Stan and Ollie performed their act, A Spot of Trouble, billed as Two Gentlemen en Route. There was no programme produced this week, but they did have a specific poster, and we obtained a copy of it from Shauna and Gerald Peake, relatives of the theatre owner from the time, Fred Peake. In the Laurel and Hardy stage routine, the boys arrive for a meeting at the railway station, but have no tickets or money to buy any. Part of this routine can be seen in the film Stan and Ollie. They sleep on a bench, get tied up in each other, a similar routine to birthmarks. A policeman comes along and asks them if they can help him get onto the good side of the police chief. So they hatch a plan and rob his house, in a reworking of the film The Night Owls, including getting through the window routine. The sketch ends in a chase. Like most of the tour, the cop was played by an actor, Leslie Sperling, and the chief was played by Kenneth Henry. The show went down very well with the local audiences, as Stan mentions in one of his letters. In a letter to his friend Booth Coleman, written at the Empire, Leeds, the 7th of April 1952, he stated, "Terrific business in Hanley last week. Opening tonight here with big advance bookings, so looking forward to another bumper week." The theatre served the local area with all kinds of entertainment, from comedy and pantomime to ballet. Like many theatres in the country, it was taken over by Mecca Bingo in 1961. It became a theatre again during the 1980s, and for a while was renamed just as the Royal. It was sold off and gutted in 2000 and is now 2 nightclubs.
Let's now go round the corner to Brunswick Street. Here is the rear to the theatre and the former stage door entrances.
Countless celebrities came and went here, and of course it meant that from here many autographs would have been signed. including one that hung on the wall of a nearby public house, which we shall go to shortly. Another autograph was obtained by an on-duty police officer called Eric Rushton, who had it dedicated to his daughter Shirley. But before we do, we must tell you about the boys' performance and of a local photographer, Houston Spratt. The local newspaper said that Stan was unwell and Ollie was out of breath and found it difficult in rising from his chair. An insider said that he was sweating and needed to bathe 3 times daily. Douglas T. Cam worked on the Royal Stage for 12 years, and he recalled to Lawrence Reardon for his booklet, Laurel and Hardy in Stoke-on-Trent, that the boys came with their own prop man, who had said that he had been in the service of Laurel and Hardy for a number of years. It was this gent who was in charge of the gear, stage clothes and stage props, which were all kept in trunks and wicker skips, except for the stage bowler hats, which were stored in special hat boxes. The wives also had their own luggage for their special dresses, and they watched every performance. Douglas Cam found the boys quiet and remembered that Stan was suffering with his sight, especially in the darker backstage area, and had to be helped onto the stage. Babe had a dressing room number 1 and Stan had number 2. For one of the routines, Babe wanted a 2-seater sofa, as 3-seaters were all the rage and 2-seaters were difficult to find. Fred Peake came to their aid with his own sofa. Babe, being the build he was, managed to break the springs. Fred wasn't upset though. For many years afterwards, he kept the prop at his house in Blythe Bridge, never even having it repaired, even though he could easily afford a new one. He often said that Laurel and Hardy sat on that, and when that finally goes out of the house, so do I. Another person interviewed by Lawrence Reardon was Peter Shaw, who had fond memories of the performance, especially the railway station scene, with the boys tying themselves together. For Lawrence's booklet, he made this cartoon drawing. Houston Spratt was known as photographer on the road for local newspaper The Evening Sentinel, and was their picture editor for 48 years. It was his job to take a photo of the boys, and this took place backstage at 10 a.m. on Monday the 31st of March. Houston was introduced to the comedy duo by Percy Hughes, the theatre general manager. Houston asked them to stand side by side and Ollie went to the left, so he apologised and asked them to change sides, so that the caption would read Laurel and Hardy, and not Hardy and Laurel. He only took one shot, as with it being just after the war, you didn't want to waste film. His only regret was that he didn't print a copy for them to sign. Later that day, Houston went with a friend to watch them perform. For years there was a local story that he took 2 photos, but this was easily brushed off, as a way of explaining the boys being in the wrong position. It wasn't until about 10 years ago, when Houston came to one of our film events, that he presented us with a mouse mat he'd printed himself, featuring a second photo he'd taken for himself and never printed in the paper. Like other theatres in the country, who had their own unique way of remembering the stars, the Royal had a tablecloth which stars would sign, and then the names would be stitched over and embroidered. We were lucky enough to see it firsthand in 2006, while preparing for the convention in 2007. We do not know what's happened to this since though. On Sunday the 7th of June 1992, the Birds of a Feather and a Spot of Trouble tents put a joint Oliver Hardy centenary film convention here. As well as films, Ray Saunders and Simon Wolfe did a routine with AJ Marriott, recreating the spirit of the vintage show. In June 1998, it was a turn of lookalikes Pete Lindup and Steve King to tread the boards as the boys. They did one act, among other lookalikes and dance acts, as a tribute one-off show called The Royal Story. We had previously seen Lindup and King in a show called The Laurel and Hardy Tribute Show, held in Nantwich on the 17th of February 1998.
And here we are at the Stage Door pub, frequented for the last 40 years or so by rockers, as well as the odd celebrity or two from the theatre.
It is situated in Gitana Street, named after a local theatre legend, Gertie Gitana, but in 1952 it was called Frederick Street. In 1952 it had its former name of the Mechanics Inn. We have it on good authority that Oliver Hardy and Stan Laurel both drank in here. Not that much has changed inside since 1952, but we do know that a pillar stood here, and the intervening years, the aforementioned signed photo, along with many other stars of the stage and screen, adorned the walls. Bill Townley told us an interesting anecdote about the boys in the pub. After the show, both Stan and Babe were at the bar, in character. They went up to a local at the bar. Stan produced a pair of scissors from his pocket, cut his tie in half and handed it to him. Babe went, The man stood there dumbstruck. The next day they presented the man with a brand new box tie, purchased from Hunchbatches, a very expensive shop at the time.
Next we move to Adventure Place, which is just up the road here, not far from the old Odeon cinema. In Adventure Place, which, as you can see, full of offices and a club that was once owned by snooker legend Ray Reardon, and next to me is the famous Victoria Halls.
This street used to have the boarding house run by Mr. and Mrs. Parkinson, where many of the theatre support acts would stay. Did Laurel and Hardy visit them here? We don't know. Some said that the support acts were aimed more at children, whereas the local newspapers say that there were clever and entertaining variety acts. Another local guest house that would put some of the acts up was at 115 Lichfield Street, run by the Hardell family. We do believe that Stan did visit this residence, as their guest book contains a message, "Hello Pops," signed by Stan Laurel. We do know that the support artist Jimmy Elliott definitely stayed here. Jimmy was an animal impersonator who mimicked animals on stage and radio. He appeared on the radio as far back as the 5th of March 1930 and was on various shows right through to 1954, appearing on Workers' Playtime. In 1937 he was filmed by Pathé News doing farmyard animal impressions in the short titled Art and Artists, which you can find on the Pathé website.
First of all, the notes of the cuckoo.
He retired soon after 1954, and in a letter by Stan dated the 24th of December 1955 mentions that Jimmy had a nice steady job and that he was much happier. Other support on the tour at our venue was from the Shane sisters, Jackie and G, the Ariel Kenways, Savine and Daisy May, Reggie Redcliffe and Nicole and Kemble. The Shane sisters were a dance act who we think appeared twice on the bill, at the beginning and again after the interval. Joy Jackley and Seth G were another comedy act. Joy was the sister of rubber-necked comedian Nat Jackley. They proved popular with the Hanley audience and were rebooked for an 8-week panto, Goody Two Shoes, at the end of the year. The sensational Ariel Kenways were known as Agile Aerialists. They probably had their roots in circus, with their act adapted for the stage due to limited space. We don't know much about this family troupe, but Stan did make a reference to Paul Kenway in a letter dated 1953. The act itself dates back to at least 1943, where we see them referenced in a Billboard magazine as 2 men and 2 women. They were still going to at least 1955. In 2018, Roger Robinson obtained a signed picture of the 3 men act version. We do know that part of their act was a dental act, referring to the art of one person hanging onto the other by means of a mouthguard. They first joined Laurel and Hardy on tour at the Empire in Newcastle-on-Tyne in March and stayed with them for the rest of the tour. Albert Savine was a ventriloquist, born in 1914, with his schoolgirl dummy Daisy May, one of the 14 puppets. The dolls were packed away in a suitcase and could be heard arguing from inside. During his act, he would sometimes have a dummy dog that would make fun of a second dog, asking if he could talk and saying he was stupid. This other dog, Mickey, would say, "Why don't you shut that ruddy dog up?" using a fake human-controlled mouth, but would then get up and walk off as he was a real dog. Savine was a trained carpenter who made his own puppets, and he appeared on numerous TV shows such as Crackerjack, and even as recent as 1988, appearing on the Paul Daniels Magic Show.
I know. I was working all night. Where? In a shirt factory. The shirt factory all night? Yeah, what do you make it? Night shirts, all right.
He went on to be the manager of local magician Van Buren, according to his son Andrew Van Buren, who had many fond memories of him. With Laurel and Hardy in the 1950s, he also played at the Empire in Liverpool and at the Gaumont in Southampton. He passed away in 1994. Reggie Redcliffe played the xylophone, or if the billing is to be believed, his xyro-lumbaphone, also seen it listed as a rumba xylophone. He is billed as the world's youngest and greatest dancing xylophonist. In 1946, he appeared at the Royal Variety performance with Arthur Askey and Terry Thomas on the same bill. Nicole and Kemble were comedy cyclists, listed also as Al and Col Kemble.
Another guest house that would put up some of the acts was at 115 Lichfield Street, Hanley, which is, or was, just behind me, where these new block of flats are. But what of the boys? Surely Laurel and Hardy didn't stay here, and you'd be right. They stayed a mere 1.2 miles away at the North Stafford Hotel in Stoke, which is our next stop. Come with me. And this is the North Stafford Hotel, built in 1849, where Stan and Ollie stopped for a week. And Stan and Ollie's room was this one, just above me on the first floor.
Many stars stayed at this hotel over the years, including Tommy Cooper, as it was a quiet hotel with good transport links. As far as we know, the management, or at least former management, still have the signed guest book from their stay. But we will likely never know, as currently the hotel is housing refugees. Bill Townley, who we mentioned earlier, had a friend who worked at the hotel and met them several times during her daily duties.
And behind us is Stoke Railway Station, a grand building built in 1848.
Going back to what we said earlier about travel, wouldn't it have made more sense for Stan and Ollie to disembark here and just pop across the road? However, some people who worked in the offices above distinctly remember them pulling up here by car. However they got it will remain a mystery. Frank Bentley and his wife remembered Stan and Ollie stopping here, as they lived nearby, and he also worked in the aforementioned first floor offices of the train station, which was the mail sorting department. He saw Stan and Babe and their wives boarding a car at least twice, between 5:30 and 5:45 p.m. There were no crowds around them. Another day he spotted them at the first floor window from his vantage point opposite in the railway canteen. Well, that's almost it for the boys' connection to the area. They came here together only once. Although when Stan was much younger, he did appear at both Crewe, Longton and Stafford when he was touring with Levy and Cardwell's juvenile pantomime company. Stan had first joined the troupe as an assistant stage manager, and by 1907 had become an actor. He made his acting debut in Sleeping Beauty or The Prince and the Golden Key. In it, he played Ebenezer Gollywog No. 2.
So, here we are in Martin Street, Stafford. Things have changed quite dramatically since a young Stan Jefferson walked here in 1908. It was in this street where the Lyceum Theatre, formerly the Playhouse, stood. Built in 1792, The theatre once boasted Charles Dickens as a guest. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by fire in 1912. Later it became a storage unit for animal feed, before being rebuilt as the Staffordshire Laboratory. Stan Jefferson appeared twice here, first on the 10th of February 1908 in Levy and Cardwell's production of Sleeping Beauty, and again same year on the 23rd of November in Levy and Cardwell's production of The House That Jack Built. This was the first night that Stan starred in this play. Here we are in Longton, one of the towns of Stoke-on-Trent, and behind me, on the corner of Commerce Street and Chancery Lane, there used to be a theatre, now a car park, standing opposite Union Street, what is now Millbank Street.
Stan appeared here on the 11th of November 1907 on the Sleeping Beauty tour. The majestic building itself was originally built in 1888, only to be destroyed by fire in 1893. It was rebuilt in 1896, later changing its name to the Empire Palace of Varieties, before becoming a cinema in 1921, and later a bingo hall. It closed in 1991, only to have history repeating itself by being set alight by arsonists in December 1992. It was the last remaining Victorian-era theatre in Stoke-on-Trent and was sadly demolished in 1997. The only other connection we know of is in the mother town of Burslem, just under 5 miles from here.
And here we are in the mother town of Burslem, and behind me is the George Hotel, which was very famous in its heyday.
This building dates from 1929 and was featured, as the blue plaque info states, in books by Arnold Bennett, who was born just up the road. There has been an inn or a pub on this site since at least the 17th century. We are pretty sure that Stan and Ollie ate a meal here, as it was a highly regarded restaurant at the time. But sadly, that's all we know. There are no newspaper articles or pictures. Maybe he wanted to see the town hall just around the corner, which has been seen in the film versions of Bennett's The Card with Alec Guinness, which was released just a month before. Or maybe he wanted to see Port Vale Football Club in action. And there we have it. The boys in Stoke. That's all there is, and there isn't any more. Except for...
Here we are at the entrance to the View Cinema in nearby Newcastle-under-Lyme. And above me here is a wonderful fresco of different film stars. Here we are in the modern era, but let's go back and see what's at the beginning. Follow me. Follow me. Oh, Mr. Hitchcock. We're nearly there. And above my head, a certain Stan Laurel, Oliver Hardy, and a Mr. James Finlayson. Don't